Welcome back to Life of Bikers. Today, we delve into a dark and chilling story that exposes the grim reality of prison life. This is the untold story of Brent Recker's prison death, an investigation into the harsh conditions behind bars and the potential causes that led to this tragedy. Brent Reker was a name not widely known outside the prison walls until his untimely death. His story, however, shines a light on the systemic issues plaguing the correctional system. Brent Reker was serving time at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison notorious for its overcrowding, violence, and harsh conditions. But before we dive into the details of his tragic end, let's take a moment to understand who Brent Reker was. Brent Reker was born and raised in a small town in Ohio. Like many others, he fell into a life of crime due to a mix of poor decisions and unfortunate circumstances. He had a troubled childhood marked by instability and lack of guidance. By the time he was a teenager, he was already in and out of juvenile detention centers. His criminal activities escalated, leading to his final conviction for armed robbery, which landed him in the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility. Recker's life behind bars was a constant struggle. The Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, known as Lucasville, is one of the most notorious prisons in the United States. It's a place where violence is rampant, and survival often means aligning oneself with gangs or other protection groups. Brent, however, tried to keep a low profile and avoid trouble. Unfortunately, this is easier said than done in a prison environment. Prison life is a world unto itself, governed by its own set of rules and power structures. Inmates often face brutal conditions, including overcrowding, inadequate medical care, and constant threats of violence. For someone like Brent, who did not have strong affiliations within the prison, navigating this dangerous environment was particularly challenging. One of the key issues that plagued Brent during his time in Lucasville was the severe overcrowding. The prison was designed to house 1,500 inmates, but regularly held over 2,000. This overcrowding led to tensions and conflicts among prisoners, as resources such as food, medical care, and even space were stretched thin. Overcrowding also meant that correctional officers were often overwhelmed and unable to maintain control, leading to frequent outbreaks of violence. In addition to overcrowding, the prison had a notorious reputation for violence. Gang activity was rampant, and assaults, both among inmates and against staff, were a daily occurrence. Brent found himself caught in the middle of this volatile environment. Despite his efforts to stay out of trouble, he could not escape the pervasive violence that characterized life in Lucasville. The medical care in the prison was another significant issue. Many inmates, including Brent, suffered from untreated or poorly managed health conditions. Brent had a history of mental health issues, including depression and anxiety, which were exacerbated by the harsh conditions of prison life. The lack of adequate mental health care in prisons is a well-documented problem. Studies have shown that inmates with mental health issues often do not receive the treatment they need, leading to worsening conditions and, in some cases, suicide. Brent's mental health deteriorated significantly during his time in Lucasville. He frequently expressed feelings of hopelessness and despair in letters to his family. His requests for mental health care were often ignored or inadequately addressed. The neglect of inmates' mental health needs is a systemic issue in prisons across the United States. The combination of harsh living conditions, lack of proper medical care, and constant threat of violence creates an environment where mental health issues are not only prevalent but often exacerbated. On the fateful day of his death, Brent was found unresponsive in his cell. Initial reports suggested that he had taken his own life, but the circumstances surrounding his death raised many questions. His family and fellow inmates pointed to several inconsistencies and potential foul play. This led to a series of investigations, both internal and external, to determine the exact cause of Brent's death. The investigations revealed several disturbing details about the conditions Brent endured. Eyewitness accounts from other inmates described frequent altercations and harassment. Some inmates reported seeing Brent being targeted by gang members and even correctional officers. The culture of violence and intimidation in Lucasville meant that vulnerable inmates like Brent were often at the mercy of more powerful and ruthless individuals. One of the most shocking revelations was the role of correctional officers in perpetuating the cycle of violence. It was alleged that some officers not only turned a blind eye to inmate-on-inmate violence, but sometimes even instigated or participated in it. This toxic environment created a sense of lawlessness, where inmates could be brutally attacked with little to no intervention from prison staff. Further compounding the tragedy were the failures in the prison's response to Brent's deteriorating mental health. Despite multiple warnings and requests for help, Brent did not receive the necessary care. The investigations highlighted systemic issues within the prison's healthcare system, including understaffing, lack of proper training, and inadequate resources. The death of Brent Reker is not an isolated incident. It reflects a broader crisis in the American prison system, where overcrowding, violence, and neglect are all too common. The tragic loss of life, like Brent's, underscores the urgent need for comprehensive prison reform. Addressing these issues requires a multifaceted approach, including policy changes, better funding for mental health care, and increased oversight to ensure the safety and well-being of inmates. Reker's family has been vocal in their calls for justice and reform. They have advocated for greater transparency and accountability within the prison system. Their fight has brought attention to the dire conditions in places like Lucasville and sparked discussions about the need for change. They have also called for independent investigations into prison deaths to ensure that such tragedies are thoroughly examined and that those responsible are held accountable. In the wake of Brent's death, there have been some steps towards reform. The Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction has faced increased scrutiny and pressure to address the issues within its facilities. Some reforms have been implemented, such as increased training for correctional officers and efforts to reduce overcrowding. However, much more needs to be done to ensure that the prison system is humane and just. The story of Brent Reker is a sobering reminder of the harsh realities faced by many inmates in the United States. It calls attention to the urgent need for prison reform and the importance of protecting the rights and well-being of those who are incarcerated. Brent's death should not be in vain. It should serve as a catalyst for meaningful change. As we conclude this investigation into the tragic death of Brent Reker, it's important to remember that behind every statistic and news headline are real people with families and stories. Brent was more than just an inmate number. He was a son, a brother, and a friend. His life, though marked by struggle, deserves to be remembered and honored. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Life of Bikers. If you found this story impactful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring important stories to life. Stay tuned for more investigations and insights into the lives and challenges of those behind bars.